I like systems and processes. Not everybody focuses on that. We realized we don't have a clear customer definition. We thought everybody would just buy this. We started seeing other competitors come into the market and sell to accountants, and we started going to events for accountants and thought, well, the way to do it is obviously get the accountants to give it to their clients. And actually, again, massive mistake, because you solve a business for people's pain, and a lot of accountants were not doing cash flow forecasting for their clients. So they said, oh, that sounds good. That's kind of it's related, but it's not really a problem that they were solving. On the majority of them, I'm talking 90%, maybe there's just 10% or less that are doing that. And we went back to trying to sell to businesses, but then again, you can't just sell to businesses as a whole. You need to be specific. We found that was quite difficult to get distribution without spending ridiculous amounts of money. And then we started hearing from some friends of mine would tell me, my CFO started using Float, and I was like, really? We always thought CFOs would be a bit sniffy about a short-term cash flow. They're used to doing lots of complex modeling and need all this stuff that we don't offer. We're trying to be simple and be simple enough for businesses that aren't financially trained to be able to use. But actually they were like, no, they love it. So we went out and interviewed these people, and we noticed the difference was they were fractional CFOs, which we didn't even really know that much about that term. So they had maybe 2 or 3, 4 or 5 clients that they were trying to do regular cash flow for, and it just started to become a pain. And so Float was making it faster, and so we thought, hold on, fractional CFOs, and started writing about it on LinkedIn, and started noticing there's whole communities of people out there that are in this space. It feels like it's growing. And then we started speaking to other fractional C-level roles, and we hired a couple ourselves, and just realized this is good, it allows us to bring in top talent for a fraction of the cost and less commitment. Hiring C-level can be a big cost.
Hello and welcome to the Gross Profit Podcast. My name is James Kennedy. I'm the co-founder and CEO at procurementexpress.com. We take the hassle out of managing your company's purchasing with magical features, but we're not here to talk about that today. Instead, we're going to talk about cash flow projections and why 2024 is the year of the fractional CFO. Now, cash flow projections is something that I've talked to many people on this podcast about, and it's easy if you're on a finance team to understand the value of them. It can be literally life or death for a business to get them right. But today I've got someone who is coming at it from the other side of the table and the operation side, someone who successfully grew a business, understood and saw the value in being able to get his finance squared away in order to drive real value. He liked it so much, he built a company totally based around that. And I'm hoping that you would be able to share this podcast today, maybe prospects of yours who you're trying to advocate for the value in projecting their financials properly. They're not just getting another lecture from another finance guy. So it's the other side. So that person who we've got today is Colin Hewitt from Float app. Colin, thanks very much for coming along today. Maybe you could just tell us where you are in the world and give us a bit of your background, and I'll ask you some more questions then.
I'm over in Edinburgh in Scotland, from Belfast, Northern Ireland originally. I've been here 20 years, ran an agency for 10, and been doing Float for another 10. So it's really been 2 years, 2 different companies, very different, and loving it. Really been great so far.
Okay, now I know you're lying straight away because you're not always loving running a SaaS company or an agency for sure. Let's dig into that. Agencies are particularly prone to this. I know from my wife runs an agency, it's feast or famine. It's like being married to a stock trader and being married to my wife, because some months it's like we're on top of the world. Next month it's all doom and gloom. I never know what I'm going to get when they get the financial statement such that they have. Was that your experience, or why were you so interested in cash flow forecasting when you were running the agency?
I guess I was really keen to run my own business. There's lots of different things I could have done, but I figured doing something that was remotely connected to my degree. I did a great degree in computer software. I came out with the idea of starting websites and starting to build websites, and did a bit of freelance in that, and then started our own company. And yeah, I think at some point, I realized that I needed to educate myself, and started reading books on business and One of the books was called The E-Myth by Michael Gerber, and it really kind of described the situation I was in, which was I don't feel like I'm running my own business. I feel like I have a job.
And how many staff did you have at that stage, or how many clients?
We probably had about 4 or 5 staff, and clients, like you say, one of our big problems is that our clients were just, we didn't have a lot of recurring revenue. We had project-based revenue. So we'd launch a site or a project for somebody and then move on to the next one and move on to the next one. And then sometimes have to come back and fix stuff for the previous one, but it wasn't really what you wanted to be doing.
Yeah.
So it's a difficult business model in that sense when you're fixed bid pricing.
So listen, I read that book as well. Really brilliant. I love the idea of just what I thought it was like programming people with checklists. That's in my mind. I'm a programmer too. And I felt like if I can give them enough checklists, then it's like I'm programming the computer. But the computers, turns out, are slightly more reliable than people when it comes to checklists. We have tons and tons of checklists that never get used because we thought it was a good idea and then we gave up on it.
I think the thing for me was about systemizing, taking myself away from being the bottleneck. That was the thing that was like my aha moment. And then like building processes across finance, across sales, across marketing, across product. And like the one that I started with was finance. And that's kind of where I got stuck on, because it just became this thing that I started realizing there's so much here, from when we send an invoice to how we get it paid to where it goes into the accounting software. And at that time we were moving to cloud accounting, which was brilliant. And then like all the things you can automate in that finances to make that run so smoothly, so you can just take yourself out of it. And I think the interesting thing I remember at the time was like, if you get the finances nailed, it can just make opening or running a business so much better. Like you just see so many people get stuck, like hung up on all this stuff, which becomes painful and slow. And you don't know, oh, where's the, I'm going to have to do this or that, or hire somebody to come in and run it all for me. But if you can actually automate so much of it that it just makes starting a business so much easier.
Anthony Nitsos, who actually does some fractional CFO work for us, he's described how he puts systems in place. It doesn't matter if that they start off with 5 people, they can go to 100 people and they can still use the same systems if they put them in right to get started with. So cash flow forecasting, like that's quite an advanced topic for an SMB, certainly for a 5-person agency. What made you realize, okay, this is a key thing that we've got to get right?
It seemed like a pretty necessary thing for us to do, because I was like, what was keeping me awake at night? Those are things I want to eliminate. And one of those is like, are we going to be able to make our payroll? And I remember back in the day, we would get checks from customers and I'd literally drop them off on my way home and post them through the back door. And it felt like I was just feeding the meter. And I really, didn't like that thought. I just felt like, I'm buying myself time every time I'm posting these checks through the door. I want to start to see when I get to like take some money out of the business, or when I can I consistently pay myself. The spreadsheet that I used was one that I used to help me get out of debt. Like after I graduated, I was in my overdraft. I was like, I need to find a way. And I tried like writing down what I spent, and none of it worked until I got up my spreadsheet and plotted a list of everything that I spend, mapped it out over 12 months, and then made a graph. And once I saw the graph, that was when I got this sort of aha moment of like, if you spend £100 less than you earn every month, at the end of the year, you'll have £1,200. And if I spend £100 more, I'll have minus 1,200, which I didn't have at that point as a graduate. And I knew if I was going to run businesses, I couldn't also be like really struggling financially. I had to be able to eat and not be worrying about 2 things. So I started off getting out of debt and worked my way out through a spreadsheet. So I was very tight about how I like allocated money and spent that, and then was able to realize like I could apply this to the business. And so we actually used that template for my personal finances on the business. And I think that's kind of how I came to it, and realizing like it's still a real hassle to do this on the spreadsheet. Like I wish I could automate it.
Spreadsheets, the native language of finance teams, are great and dangerous for the same reason. And the incredible flexibility, and it's fine as long as only one person has to use it. Now we have Google Sheets, anyone can use it, and it's probably fine. I think the rule of thumb is Any spreadsheet with less than 100 rows is probably fine. Once you get beyond that, then you have to look for a software, and we'll talk about Float now in a second. So obviously your mind went to this feeding the meter. I love that. This is too hard to make a way to make a living. You decided to make a tool that allows people to collaborate. So maybe just tell us a little bit of what Float does and how does it help people work together on their projections?
I have no financial background, so I didn't understand a cash flow statement or indirect cash flow forecast or anything like that. I didn't understand really even P&L and balance sheet particularly well. So all I really cared about was cash, like how much cash is in the bank, how much is coming in, how much is going out. And when you boil it down, it's actually relatively straightforward to, put all that into a spreadsheet. But the problem is there's all these other costs that, don't neatly map. It's great when you can just go, yep, that was my rent that came out. I'll stick that in. There's our payroll that came out. But then there's like, oh, what about that Amazon payment? Or what about that event that we went to? Or what about that coffee that I bought? Where do all those get? Those are all coming out of our bank account. And where are they getting categorized? So I was exporting our bank statement into another spreadsheet, trying to categorize the expenses and figure out which box they went into. And it was just really painful and really annoying. I thought there's got to be a better way. And we started using a piece of cloud accounting software that were another Edinburgh company called Free Agent. And this is brilliant. Like, we never wanted to use desktop software, never wanted to use Sage. It had to run on a PC. We didn't even use PCs. So it was a non-starter for us. So we'd no accounting software. We tried Free Agent and thought, oh, this is fantastic. Anybody in the company can raise an invoice for the work they're doing, does our VAT, all that kind of stuff. Amazing. But it still didn't have any forecasting ability. So we spoke to Free Agent and said, hey, see, you've got an API. Like, what have we built the forecasting part on? And they said, that sounds like a good idea. So that was kind of the inception of the idea. And it was also the time whenever just web apps were starting to get better. And I don't know if you remember Basecamp coming out with a product, and you use it and it's like, this doesn't feel clunky. This actually feels like a piece of software you can use in your browser. And it was a sort of inspiring time to be alive in terms of web and what was possible with JavaScript. And you could now build these kind of single page apps.
Sure.
Didn't have to be multi-click, page by page. And so, yeah, everything that felt like it was to play for. And all of a sudden as well, like, you could host an app online, have it anywhere in the world. You didn't need to run DevOps and server rooms and all that kind of stuff, which I had a little bit of experience in and never wanted to do. So it just all kind of came at the right time.
2024 feels a little bit like 2007 again. Basecamp's back in the news. They're making noise, new versions of Rails.
Mm-hmm.
Won't go full nerd here for this audience, but like Intercom, another Irish company here, they're back in the news. They're back reinventing things. Feels like the old days in some ways, although it's way more competitive today to try and start a SaaS business. But let's get back to, okay, so you built this cash flow projection. So is Float just for cash-based accounts, or does it work for accrual-based accounts as well? How does that fit in?
So, the typical way of a lot of people start doing projections and forecasts is through a P&L. You have a P&L balance sheet and you derive a cash flow, which is, something you might do from your budget at the start of the financial year. And really what we've tried to model is more of a 13-week rolling direct method cash flow, which I didn't know that's what it was called back then, but it's that kind of principle, and almost saying, well, yeah, let's run it for 13 weeks, but also we can run it out for a couple of years as well. So it works for companies across the board. But by focusing on cash, it makes it really easy for business owners to understand. So it's like, let's put our budgets in cash. If it's like a loan, you don't have to understand, does this loan go on the balance sheet, or does this equipment go on, how do we depreciate the schedule? Like, it's just, when do we pay the loan? Put it in the loan payment. When do we pay the lease? Put that in, and it's just all cash in and cash out focused. So it's direct method. And that allows us to get really granular because we're pulling in invoices and bills as well. So it's not just based on the budgets that you've put in. It's actually melding together that, we said we're going to spend like 10K on marketing this month, but we've actually got an invoice or a bill sitting in for 20,000. So like, which one do we use? And we decide like based on which is a higher figure. So it's like there's a bill. We know there's a bill coming out for 20 grand on the 15th. So that's what we're putting in the cash flow. So it's kind of almost merging these two worlds together a little bit, which is quite unusual, but it feels like it works really well.
So definitely businesses that are, cash based, or, something like e-commerce, I guess, where it's really important. You're fast growing e-commerce. You can easily run out of cash. What other sectors are really great clients for you?
Obviously, like say, the world has changed a little bit. And in the early days, we never thought we would sell to like SaaS companies, for example, because we thought, well, the problem is it's just not a big cash flow's not a big enough pain. Like these companies are raising millions and then they're worrying about runway for a few months of the year until they raise their next round, and then they forget about cash again. But now it's very different, obviously. So we've had companies like SaaS companies doing like 10 million ARR coming to us and saying, look, we're on this journey to become profitable. We want to know, we've got an outstanding client who owes us like a significant amount and they're struggling to pay. We need to know our intra-month bank balance projections. So not just the start and the end of the month cash position. Actually, like we need to know on the 17th, if that person doesn't pay us, we're going to be like in our overdraft. So it's really about trying to, show people a bit more granularly what's happening. And then, you multiply that by 10 when you've got 10 unpaid invoices and you're not sure when they're going to get paid. And also like maybe you then need to stop, like, hold off from paying some of your clients' bills because there's not going to be the money there to do it. And obviously the big one's payroll. So
I'm getting the shivers just talking about it. Yeah. Okay. So you handle the invoices, expected invoices, I guess, due dates, etc., to model your income, and then you have your bills. They're straightforward. How about orders? Like Xero has a purchase order functionality, for example. Can that be used to model out? Do people actually use them effectively?
Yeah, so that's actually an area that we are hearing more on, and we don't support at the moment purchase orders, but you can enter them in manually into Float.
Got it.
So it would be a case of just going, yeah, we can put that in as a project that we're working on and put it in as an expected payment. But yeah, ideally we'll start pulling those purchase orders in as well.
Yeah.
But as soon as those become like get moved over from a purchase order to an actual bill, that's when we would actually get that and put that into the system as a projected item that's going to be coming out on a certain date.
We could go down a rabbit hole there. Obviously, that's close to my heart, but let's avoid it and talk about who's your first client. Rice and Holloman Corporation in Texas, my first client. I love that guy. He's retired now, but God knows where we'd be without him. Who was your first client?
It's a bit of a blur because the way we launched was, and this is interesting. We went on a couple of forums and said we're doing this beta. We got 500 signups for the beta within like a month. So we were pretty excited about that. And we started rolling out invites in like batches of 50. So we'd get 50 people on and they'd tell us like, oh, this is far too complicated. I'm never going to have time to do this. And we would learn and we would roll out a new version and try that and move on. So eventually we had about 100 or so like people that were actually using the product. And we actually said we're going to be rolling out a founder's plan. So if you sign up to...
Do not tell me you're giving them a lifetime deal. Please do not tell me. Oh, man.
Yeah, and you know what? I would do it again. Like it felt,
okay.
It gave us, instead of having, at the time our prices were far too low. I think we were like £10 a month or maybe even less. Like we're really nervous about putting people off. And I think free agent cost £20 a month. So we felt like, well, we can't be as much as free agent. It's a full accounting software. We're just doing cash flow. So we charged £10 a month. And we said a lifetime membership for £300. But that, we sold 100 of those and we got 300 customers. So that gave us 30K. And that was actually amazing, to start off, to get that cash in the door. I think it just gave us something to sort of, if we just said annual plans, people might not have gone for it. They might have thought, well, we'll hold off. It's not quite ready yet. Or I don't know. Maybe we should have done differently, but it just that sense of they were getting a deal. We wanted to see if we could get people to buy it or not. And it meant that if they churned, it was about 2.5 years of our annual plan at that time. And not everybody stuck with us, and there's a couple of people that still are. But we managed to keep kind of contain it to just the free agent product. So some people eventually moved over to zero, and then they started paying us. So it wasn't completely lifetime. It was just lifetime on free agent. So
you bring up something there, because this is a debate I have with my wife all the time. Like, she will sell explainer video for like $5,000, and then, she has this painful project to go through with clients and revisions and people changing their mind, et cetera, and tough, like producing these things. A bit like websites, I guess, you have the usual human element. But then she's got the $5,000, like 2 months later. It takes me sometimes 3 years to get that $5,000, right? So it's maybe just a question of perspective. Everyone thinks SaaS businesses are the land of milk and honey, but they have their own problems.
Yeah.
I think you probably hit it dead right. 2.5 years is not a bad lifetime value for that sort of product. So I take it all back. You're a genius. So I got a clear idea. Float app is for, this brings us on to the year of the fractional CFO. I guess, now a lot of the people you work with are fractional CFOs. It happens to be a focus for us as well. Those people who are just getting a bit too big for zero. Like, actually, we're using budgeting in zero, and our budgets are fixed. You have to put it in. It doesn't change. It's wrong in month one. It doesn't roll, and it's not even cash-based. So all these things straight away, you can see why people might want that. And we're also in this space where the features of free agent and QuickBooks and Xero aren't fully fleshed out enough. And that's where apps like Float App and Procurement Express come in. And frequently, fractional CFOs come in and they use us as a bag of tricks. They use us and Bill.com. So, we do the order management. Bill.com will pay the bills. So tell us about how fractional CFOs, you build relationships with them, and why have you found traction with them?
It's an interesting one. We kind of just stumbled across it, really, because one of our biggest mistakes as a business was believing that every customer would be like me. I thought like everybody would be doing cash flow. And like you were saying about your wife's business, it's just like, it's not everybody's that way inclined. I like systems and processes. Not everybody focuses on that. So, we realized like we don't have a clear customer definition. We thought everybody would just buy this. And then we started seeing other competitors come into the market and sell to accountants. And we started going to events for accountants and thought, well, the way to do it is obviously get the accountants to give it to their clients. And actually, again, massive mistake, because, you solve a business for people's pain, and a lot of accountants were not doing cash flow forecasting for their clients. So, they said, oh, that sounds good. That's kind of, it's related, but it's not really a problem that they were solving. So, on the majority of them, I'm talking 90%, maybe there's just 10% or less that are doing that. And we went back to trying to sell to businesses, but then again, you can't just sell to businesses as a whole. You need to be specific. And we found that was quite difficult to get distribution without spending ridiculous amounts of money. And then we started hearing from people that were some friends of mine would tell me, oh, my CFO started using Float. And I was like, really? We always thought CFOs would be a bit sniffy about short-term cash flow. They're used to doing lots of complex modeling and need all this stuff that we don't offer. We're trying to be simple and be simple enough for businesses that aren't financially trained to be able to use. But actually, they were like, no, they love it. So we went out and interviewed these people, and we noticed the difference was they were fractional CFOs, which we didn't even really know that much about that term. So they were using the product they had maybe 2 or 3, 4 or 5 clients that they were trying to do regular cash flow for, and it just started to become a pain. And so Float was making it faster. And so we thought, hold on, fractional CFOs, and started writing about it on LinkedIn, and started noticing like there's whole communities of people out there that are in this space, and it feels like it's growing. And then we started speaking to other fractional C-level roles, and we hired a couple ourselves, and just realized this is good, like it allows us to bring in top talent for a fraction of the cost and less commitment, in the initial stages. Hiring C-level can be a big cost. So yeah, we noticed, we kind of stumbled into it really, and I think it's just been fascinating to explore that more.
You mentioned there about sophistication. I have to trail an upcoming podcast I have with Manny Scavalafax. It's a really interesting podcast. He learned from 3 billionaire families on how to run businesses. And now he helps, people as a fractional CFO. He went to a fancy school. He came out of there with a finance degree, ready to do discounted cash flow statements and future value, whatever, and all this fancy stuff. And he realized when he worked with these families, they ran these billion-dollar companies like in a very simple way. And that was actually the only way they could scale a business significantly. You just said that and it just reminded me, watch out for that podcast coming up, because it's very interesting about how actually the basics and simple approach can scale very, very well. And sometimes they're just trying to be fancy for the sake of it. I also concur 100%. Most accountants are morticians. They turn up 6 months later and say, hey, I didn't tell you this, but you actually went out of business 6 months ago. You just didn't know it. By the way, here's your tax bill and here's my bill, And the dirty little secret is 80% of accountants tell you they want to be a trusted business advisor, but only really 20% want to, and maybe 5% actually managed to be. Little segue. Okay, so let's get back to the year of the fractional CFO. This is a campaign that you are running, I guess, because you're trying to help these folks. Tell us about that. What's involved in it?
One of the things as we started posting about this is that other businesses that I knew, other founders would reach out and say, yeah, I thought my accountant would be doing this for me. I thought, we need help with the numbers. We got an accountant. I'm on my third accountant now. It's the same thing. They're just reactionary. Like, what do you recommend? And it's like, oh, okay. So there's a way to run a business and have a proper system. And it's not just a fractional CFO. You still need an accountant to do your taxes and keep you in business. And it's not just a fractional CFO. It's also a bookkeeper. And so having those three roles working really well together, like a bookkeeper does this, our CFO does this, and our accountant does this, and understanding that is still like big news for a lot of people. We just feel like there's more clarity that we can bring to the market. We can help connect fractional CFOs with businesses that need help, and also just that like almost disentangle the sort of mess that people get into with feeling awkward, like they don't want to leave their trusted accountant that they've been with for years. Actually, like maybe start by bringing in a more proactive bookkeeper, let them deal with some of the like tax things or the accountant related things, and then bring in your CFO to be more strategic and like help you really understand what the numbers are actually telling you. That's been our journey, and there's definitely been some accountants that really, like you say, want to go on that journey, want to move, want to transition, or even thinking of like rebranding themselves as not in that space.
Well, in the States, I've seen it now. I don't know if there's a new trend, but I've noticed it more, which is have your tax accountants, your FP&A, financial planning and analysis, which is quite separate, which is kind of where Float fits in, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have your kind of investment bankers almost, like acquisitions, M&A, that sort of stuff, and then you have your operational people, like KPI people who bring KPIs into the business. I don't know what you call them exactly. They're CFOs, but they're commercial CFOs or whatever, So you're right. It's a bit of a mess. I think they need to tease it out a bit, because as a buyer, like someone like you're a buyer, you need a fractional CFO. It's very hard to understand. Like, why is my accountant doing this? I don't understand. It needs to be cleared up. There's an opportunity here as well. Some people will be listening to this. Maybe you're full time, working on a finance team. It's a trend that people are able to fractionalize their skills. Maybe you tell us a bit about that.
I spoke to a recruiter recently who just focuses on fractional roles now, and he was even saying that the most popular one is the fractional CEO, which is a new one to me, and that's kind of for fractional technical teams that need to bring in somebody more commercial and want somebody to front the business, but they don't need them to be there full time. So that was a new one to me. But there is this rise of going, one of the biggest mistakes I see young companies make is all the people they hire are junior, so they're really able to get stuck in. But then there's a transition stage where you need to start bringing in people who have experience and who've done it before, and who will stop you from going down routes that are going to really waste your time. I mean, I've learned this the hard way. You just don't know what you don't know, and sometimes you have to make those mistakes, but other times you can work with people who have been there before. But you don't need them to be full time. You just need a part of their brain to give you that advice at the right time. So yeah, it feels like it makes sense. It feels like COVID probably accelerated it for people, because all of a sudden the workforce became kind of disaggregated, where you could just be anywhere and the location matters less. So, I think it just makes sense in so many levels. And, I think, to be honest, maybe there's a lot of people jumping on the bandwagon, and maybe it'll be a bit of overkill, and who knows, but certainly at the moment it feels like it's a great opportunity for people who have been in those leadership positions. And I do stress, like, it doesn't feel right for somebody just to call themselves a fractional C-level person if they haven't been in the C-level role before full time, at least for a bit, because there's no kind of qualification for C-level. Anybody can say I'm a fractional CMO or a fractional CFO, and actually you can't just say I'm a CMO or a CFO. Like, you have to have actually had a business in a business that can like afford one of those types of people. So I think there could be a bit of a kickback, but at the end of the day, it makes a lot of sense for both the business and for the CFO.
Well, as someone who decided to call himself a CEO with absolutely zero experience for the job, I reject that totally. I think you're totally off the mark there. I think you can call yourself whatever you want out there, and that's fine. And fake it till you make it, maybe. I don't know. I think you're right. I think there's a website you should check out. It's hilarious, called overemployed.com. And in COVID, everyone went and got themselves a side hustle, aka breaking the exclusivity clause in their employment contract. Loads and loads of people do it. I think now some of those now have actually been able to start picking up enough clients that they're now deciding, okay, I'm going to move on. It's happened in our firm, and I'm kind of proud of them in a way. They've managed to sort of get a side business going or whatever. It's scary to be able to jump off the edge, but now what you can do very easily is you can pick up a client or two. I mean, I think I heard you on your podcast this morning talking to Stacey, and she started off as a fractional CFO helping her brother just at the weekend while she was on maternity leave. And then, word spread and bingo, now she has a business. And then also a lot of the big tech firms I know are forcing people back into the office. Some of the senior talent is just going, no. I don't know if there's pushback on it. I think it's because from the employer's perspective, it's actually kind of a dream where you get to work with someone and then you decide whether, you get to work with them fractionally. You can work, oftentimes they'll have some sort of setup project for a couple of grand. You can do whatever. You can just work with them. Yeah. No home, no fault. Compare that to taking an FTE on. Way more risky, way more expensive, way more difficult to move people on if it's not a fit or whatever. And I don't know how your experience of this is, but if only you could just pay people more to get better performance. But that's just not the way the world works. And, fractionally people charge more, which they should, but then you're paying for that flexibility. And if they're not worth it, they can move on. If they are, the money's really not an issue. So I believe in it. I mean, the only issue can be around culture. How do you build a team if everyone's fractional? No one's really interested. Who's committed? It's a mission, vision, values, all that sort of stuff. So I'm not sure how that works out. But for specialized roles like this, where we don't deserve a full-time CFO for what we're doing, but definitely come in, set us up, put us on the right path, and then move on. Have you any tips for people who are gonna hire fractionally? What's your biggest success been in?
I would say, a big one's going to be, because anybody can say they're a fractional C-level person, you want to find people who have experience in the type of business that you're in and get really good references. Again, it's just amazing how many times I think people hire without getting proper reference checks.
What question do you ask when you go ask for a reference check? How do you do that call?
I would just be looking for somebody to say, how's this person been for you, like in the business? Like, have they delivered? And ultimately, you go back to a couple of customers, and if they can't give you good references, then that's a bit of a warning sign. So, if you're a fractional CFO, you should have a couple of clients that can speak on your behalf and say, like, I don't want to tell you this guy is good because I want more of his time.
Yeah.
Or, she's been amazing, like, and I'm reluctant to even say too much because, I'd like her to come on board full time, but she won't. Those sort of statements, that's what I hear. And it makes me think, that's the sort of person that I'd like to bring in. And it's pretty simple, nothing more than that. And the other thing being, like, if you're a SaaS company and you're bringing in somebody who's been in like enterprise sales, it's a bit of a difference potentially of just how the business model works, or the things that they've been able to do in one company might not be relevant to another. So that's maybe worth thinking about, what's the crossover in experience.
I really like that, if you're listening for the magical words, I'm trying to make them full-time and they won't. Maybe that's the magic words you're listening for. I'll just ask you now, before I ask my last question, my traditional question, before we get to that, how can people get in touch with you? How do they find Float App? Where they can find out more about your podcast, or what other resources do you have for them?
It's floatapp.com. the podcast is still in its early days. We're still working out how we're going to publish it. Are we just going to do snippets or full interviews and all that kind of stuff? So my LinkedIn is probably the biggest one. You search for Colin Hewitt at LinkedIn. That's where we're pushing a lot of content out of these days.
I saw that. The LinkedIn is really good. I recommend people checking it out. You've obviously got some fractional help making that look good, I'm guessing.
A little bit, yeah.
All right. So now here comes big question. Who is your business hero?
It's slightly cheesy, but I think my business hero is still Richard Branson. I love the way he's managed to build so many different businesses and still comes out as like somebody who's loving life. When I compare that to someone like Elon Musk or even Steve Jobs, it just feels like, yeah, I respect what they've been able to build, but Richard was definitely like family first, and like he looked like he was having a good time doing it, and it was still fun, and he got to work with people that he liked, and that's for me is like the big dream, is to be like, do what you love doing and with people that you love doing it with, and then ultimately try and make a difference in those areas that you go into. Like, yeah, let's take on airlines, let's take on banking, let's take on other things like that, and then let's build an island and like bring people together and have a lot of fun. So I just think, yeah, it's fantastic, and love this, like the TV show about him. And I also have heard that, somebody who spent time with him said that he's just really good at delegation and he doesn't hold on too tightly. And again, that's really inspiring for me, because the CEOs that I see like holding on too tightly, they're just always stressed. They're working so hard. They're not getting to like enjoy their lives, and I think he manages to get the balance really, really well.
All right. Well, if you are still listening to the podcast at this stage, congratulations. Your reward is the ability to be able to sign up for our newsletter. You can get it at procurementexpress.com/newsletter. You get the update on Colin's podcast, this description here. We're going to put in blogs and other information. The newsletter goes out every week. It has reviews of the podcast that we do. We also have industry news in there. And then we also have an app of the week, which I strongly suspect is going to be floatapp.com this week if the production team get it right. So sign up for that, and your prize will be beautiful emails in your inbox every Friday. So thanks very much, Colin. This has been really enjoyable. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, James. Great to chat to you.